So how good could your mastering engineer be if there's more than one pair of speakers? What does that tell you about them? I'm not saying that every studio that has multiple pairs of speakers is a bad thing, but you want a mastering engineer that knows their room and their speakers intimately and doesn't have to check on another set of speakers. Hopefully they're spending their time, effort, money, knowing that the room, the listening spot, and the speakers are as linear and perfect and telling as they can be. And if you have to go to another set of speakers to be able to tell you what else is happening, you have some serious problems. Problems in your room or problems in your speakers. So when you walk into a master, I used to say this a lot, but I do know a couple of mastering engineers, of course, that have multiple pairs of speakers because sometimes there are multiple engineers working in those rooms. So not every mastering studio that has multiple speakers is a bad thing, but there is, but it should be really telling that the engineer is not spending all their time on the gear or the computer system or trying to chase that new technique of multiband compression. It's that they've spent hours and hours and their whole life savings on setting up the best listening system they possibly can. That's the most important thing about mastering. If you know what's happening in the mix, you can make it better. If you can't hear what's happening in the mix and you don't know what the best quality audio is supposed to be, then how can you make it the best? All the rest of those tools are just tools. It's like, you can't like build a house without a hammer and a saw and a crane and all that stuff. But you also have to have you also have to know how to build a house and have a solid foundation. I'm really into building analogies. I don't know why lately. Okay, so did I spend time finding the sweet spot to place the speakers? Yes. We spent an entire day here just placing the speakers before we did any tuning. So, and that was only after having a room that was built really, really well, and we knew generally where the speakers were supposed to go. But yeah, we still, you figure out where the center of the room is, you mark everything off, you figure out, thank you, thanks for that, you figure out where one speaker is optimally working in the room, and then when you put the other one in, it starts messing everything up, and you move the console forward and back. You just there are a few rules of thumb and a few things to start with, but everything that you end up with at the end is definitely not what you started out with. Dee was here for that, and she can attest to that. And I've set up 2 different mastering rooms now, and I've been involved in building 5 different studios, and I can say that the biggest thing is as it's being built and as you're trying to make decisions about how it should sound, you have to be able to play music in there and do some shooting and figure out what where the speakers should go before you even start figuring out what kind of console you're going to get or where that should go and all that. What do I think about 5.1 surround in mastering? Well, we do have a 5.1 surround mastering room right next door, so I do think it's completely valuable. I think music in surround is amazing if it's done right, and I really enjoy working on that. I don't think there's anything that's controversial about that in the mastering world, unless somebody's heard something that I haven't. Okay, how much does a mastering engineer usually charge? Should I answer that question? There are many different prices that mastering engineers charge for working. Some charge an hourly rate, anywhere between $150 and $500 an hour. Some charge a per track rate, some charge a minute rate. I would say there are how do I say that? There are ways of knowing what you're going to get. There are also rules, like in any business, in any service, you get what you pay for, hopefully. What's the average per track rate? I don't know what the average is. There are different rates in different cities. I personally have a bit of a global business. I work all over the world with engineers in the UK or LA, here in San Francisco. But I know a lot of places in LA are anywhere between $150 and maybe $200, $300 a track for a pretty darn good mastering engineer. Some are a little bit more inflated, where you're spending more like $500 to $700 a track. And actually, I had somebody, I was speaking at a convention on Saturday, I had somebody come up and tell me that they were paying $1,500 a track as a bro rate in the UK. And I was blown away. I was just like, oh my God, that's so crazy. What do I charge? It depends on a lot of things, but in general, I'm working at about anywhere between $120 to $150 a track for like a 3 to 5 minute rate. So that's definitely low. It's on the lower end, but I do work in the Bay Area, and a lot of musicians are independent and they're not being backed by labels, and so so I'm definitely cheaper than LA. But you get a really good product. I'm really sad when people spend way too much on mastering and they aren't happy, because then it gives the rest of us a bad rap. I charge what I need to pay my bills and to make sure that our business is getting what it needs, but I don't believe in gouging people just to make extra money. I will say though that it should be pretty telling that when you walk into a mastering studio that is charging you $20 a track or even $40 a track, they cannot, I can tell you right now, after I've been working on my own business for the last, almost working in the mastering world for almost 10 years, trying to get a mastering business started, and I can tell you really seriously that $40 a track cannot run a studio like this. The business just doesn't work. So you can't pay your bills. You can't run a good business, even on volume, and you cannot afford really, really good quality stuff and high rent, like a place here in the Bay Area, on $40 a track. So my info for mastering is on both of our websites, www.coastmastering.com, and also my personal website, piperpayne.com. You can get me through either of those. Okay, difference in mastering pop versus electro versus rock music. Technique's the same overall. Now we can talk about mastering. Okay, everybody done with the room? Okay, I'm going to move on. So let's talk about the console and the gear that I've got chosen here. So we spoke a little bit about the speakers. You need to have a full range system that is tuned for you in your place. I don't care how anybody else in this facility likes the sound of this mastering console. It's about how I feel about it. What I want is for it to feel very linear. I don't want too much bass. I don't want too much in the high end. I want to be able to hear everything. I want to hear depth and height in the system. I've spent a lot of time in the audiophile world too, so I definitely believe that you can have a very, very good sound, and it can actually show height in the stereo image and a lot of depth. And that's where, at that point, the music becomes an experience. And I believe that even on a system that you're working on, I think you can do that. Okay, so let's go to, let's see, where did I go? Oh, you asked me a little bit about the difference between rock versus electro versus all those different kinds of music when we're mastering. In mastering, what we're really worried about is the relationship between the bass and the treble, the mid-range and the really high end, the stereo image, the compression, the way that everything's interlacing. We're not really caring about so much the genre of music that we're working on. We're really worried about how the presentation of that genre is going to come across. So obviously there are wrong ways to master music. There are right ways to master one type of music, like classical music, and there are wrong ways to use those same techniques to then try and master a house track. It's not going to work. But you can keep the same principles in mind. The only differences come in format. So when I'm mastering the digital version, so that's going to be anything from the high resolution to the video version to the CD to the streaming version, all those have the same format, and those are going to all be mastered in the exact same way. And all I'm going to do is master it at the highest quality I possibly can. So working at the highest resolution my system can handle practically. And then if the only other time I would master something differently would be if it's going to be destined for a completely different format, like a vinyl LP, we'll master it completely differently. And if it's destined for cassette or something like that, which is actually coming up a lot here in the Bay Area, we have a lot of hipsters that are making cassettes. It's pretty fun, but there is a very different way that I master cassettes as well. So there is, again, there's not really a huge difference in the kind of music that I'm working on because those variables are generally fixed, but the presentation of that music and the techniques that I use to get to that really good sound are always different. And then on top of it, what I'm looking for in the final version is the difference in the types of formats that it's destined for. So usually we make only one version for the digital, unless it has like a radio edit or something like that, then we'll master that again. But it's going to be the exact same, whether it's going to be played in the digital realm or on the radio or in an MP3 or on your Apple earbuds or whatever. It's all going to be the same. The difference in mastering comes when we change formats. So when we go to a vinyl version, we're mastering it with different things in mind. When we go to a cassette, something like that, it's going to be different as well. All right, so let's go back to the console here just for a second. I want to see if we can get this to show. So there's a huge lag, so I'm going real slow. All right, I want that to show right there. Okay. Ah! I'm falling. Okay, so thanks, Dee.